Hi, welcome back to CCNA 3, Module 5. We're going to talk about ACLs for IPv4. So first, we're going to talk about standard ACLs. Then we're going to talk about different ways to modify the ACLs. Securing our V2 lines, that's if you want to telnet or SSH into a switch, we can limit which networks are able to do that. And then, of course, extended access lists, which is probably the most important out of all of this. So these are the things that they're going to want you to do within a text editor. They want you to actually go into the text editor and put what you want to do, and then actually the iOS commands and then remarks to document it. This is a very important step. Please put remarks in your ACLs. However, doing it in a text editor and going through this process is kind of one of those things that a beginner might want to do. If you have to go through a change control process anyway, it probably makes more sense to do it that way. But it really just depends on your comfort level and what you're comfortable with. Me personally, I've written a lot of ACLs. I'm very comfortable with writing ACLs. I do it directly in the CLI, and I usually don't apply it before it's reviewed, but it really just depends on your comfort level. This is a very safe way of doing it, so there's nothing wrong with this by any means, but it's kind of one of those things that you can kind of choose your preference. So then, of course, if you do it in a text editor, you're going to have to actually put it in the device afterwards, and then you want to thoroughly test your ACL. You want to make sure it actually blocks what you want it to block. It actually allows what you want it to allow. It's working properly, so we don't have a massive security hole that we don't think we have. Or get a bunch of issues from users once we apply it. So we went over this, but there's different numbers we can use to specify if it's extended or standard. Remember these numbers, very important. Those are our standards, and I will put blue for extended. So keep that in mind. So here's our syntax. We're going to start with access list. That's a good one to remember to start. After that, we can kind of question mark our way through it. And if you're not familiar with the question mark is going to give us the syntax that we need next. So if I put access list question mark, which I guess I really should have done this in the last slide here, you'll be able to see, okay, here's all my options that I can put after access list here. Awesome command. You should always use a question mark. But after this access list command, then we have our ACL number. Very important. Of course, 1 through 99, and 1300 to 1999. Those are going to be our ranges for these standard ACLs. And they're here. So we'll have those, or if you need an extended ACL, you'll put the different range for them. We also, after we specify the ACL, then we're going to either deny, permit, or leave a remark. So the remark is kind of special. It's just having some documentation in iOS itself. Very helpful. I really recommend it. Even if you don't care about the next guy coming in, even if you're only selfish, leaving good documentation for yourself can be very useful. And if you're denying or permitting, then you will need to specify a source. Because this is a standard ACL, we're only specifying a source, and then the wildcard mask for that source. And we can add this log command if we want to send a syslog message to our router. Now, usually in an enterprise environment, we're going to actually have a syslog server that we send to, and it's going to log that somewhere. And depending on the purpose of the ACL, we may want to log this, or we may not want to. So if it's an ACL that is specifying NAT traffic, right? Network address translation traffic, then we probably don't want to log this every single time we use NAT. However, if we are denying traffic from a internal network to SSH into a switch, that, okay, we know an administrator is not going to try to SSH from there. Maybe we want to actually send an alert and then actually look into that and have some kind of security incident. And maybe it's just internal discipline of people, and it may be an allowed something. Maybe you want to set up a honeypot type situation where you're allowing traffic, but you actually want to log that, and then you want to kind of see what a potential threat would actually do if they got into something. Whatever your use case is, this log option is good. I like using it. It gives me more information if I were to ever need that information. Now, sometimes you're not going to want that because it's going to be very verbose. If you're allowing everything and it's not a big deal most of the time, just kind of whatever. But if there's something like SSH attempts to a switch, which is very, very important from a unsecure network, that is something I would definitely log. And I kind of went over these, and if you don't remember what a wildcard mask is, then please see the previous video on that. So this is what writing a standard ACL would look like. So you'll see in this example, we're using the number 10, right? We just use that in our packet tracer as our OSPF ID. Same number, although those are not connected. So then after we've written this, you'll see they permit some hosts, so we don't have to put a wildcard mask because it's only this IP address. You'll see that they left a remark. We're going to actually block or track the rest of it. Block and track, it looks like, actually. Deny and log. So as you can see, we didn't have logs for successful attempts because we probably are assuming that they're good. But ones that are denied, we want to log that. And then we're also going to say, hey, we want this whole subnet to be permitted. Ta-da. Now, this is not actually a great example of how you would document. But they are putting documentation in there, which is good. And then, of course, you could show access list here, and it'll show you access list number 10. We're going to permit this. We're going to deny that, and we're going to permit that. And, of course, don't forget, super, super important. There's a deny any at the end of every ACL, forever and always. There is the implicit deny. Do not forget that. So, if we want to name our ACL, we have to append this IP in front of the access list command. So keep that in mind. That's why we didn't have the option. We type in access list question mark for a named ACL. So they are alphanumeric, which means we can use letters and numbers. They are case sensitive, which means if we use a capital, we have to be consistent and must be unique, of course. So capitalizing ACL names is not required, but a lot of network engineers do that. It's a very, very common practice in network engineering and in some sections of programming. Some people will do that to have all caps. Now, that usually makes it really easy to stick out in a configuration, and really easy to kind of differentiate from the rest of the world. When we're looking at a lot of data, we can see, oh, hey, this is all caps, so it's an ACL, or it's all caps, it's something that I made up. It's usually what I say when I see that. Oh, that's something that I made up. And so you'll see once you're in config mode, now this is very, very different. Before, we had to type in access list 10 and then permit or deny every single time. This time, we go into a mode, a standard access list config, named access list. That's the end there, named access list configuration mode. Now we can specify a sequence number, very, very helpful, And we can have all these other commands, right? Our permit, our deny, our remark, our no if we want to undo something. Exit, of course, we want to get out. Don't worry about that. A lot of options here. Good stuff. So, as you can see, in this case, they're using all caps here. It's a name that makes sense, right? Permit access. Hopefully, it'll be a little more specific in the real world. But you'll see here now we're in standard named access control list configuration mode. And we'll put in a remark here. And we'll put in a permit, another permit statement. And remember, again, what you don't see here is a deny any, or denial, or whatever you want to call it. Implicit deny. So they said no IP addresses were explicitly denied because we have this wonderful implicit deny here. So keep in mind that an ACL just written like we just did doesn't actually do anything. It will only do something when you apply it to an interface or feature. So you'll see what they mean. I think in section 5.3 we talk about that. And for now, we're going to use this command, IP access group, within our interface configuration command. I wish they would have shown going into the interface here. Oh, there it is, right here. That's a better example. So we go into our interface, and then we're in interface configuration mode, and we put IP access group. Very important distinction, right? We did IP access list if we want a named ACL. In this case, we're using a numbered ACL, but IP access group, our ACL name or number, and then our direction, in or out. Now, this is a very confusing thing. When I took my CCNA class, I was very confused about what determined in or out, because really when you think about it, traffic is, here's our router, traffic's flowing through the router, right? So if there's an interface here, the traffic goes in the interface, and then it goes out of the interface, and then it goes in the exit interface, and then it goes out the exit interface. So I was kind of all confused. Now really Cisco's way of doing this, and I don't think they differ from the rest of the world, but this would be our inbound interface, and this would be our outbound. Right, so the first interface it hits, if we want to police this traffic, then we're going to do that on the first interface that comes in inbound, or the last interface that it exits in outbound. And that's how we know which one will suit our needs. And then of course we can put the no in front of that, we can append that no, and that will actually remove it. And the same exact command if we want to do a named ACL, we just have to put the name instead of the number. So we can also show our running config with the access list section here, and we can see all that we typed. You can see the remarks, you can see permit and deny statements. And then also we can show our interface and include our access list if we want, and it'll tell you outgoing access list is 10, incoming is not set. Inbound, incoming, same idea. So if we show our access list, we will actually see these numbers here, which will tell us where they are in the access list. And if we show here, we show section IP access list instead of just access lists, then we'll see the named, right? Remember we have to have that IP prepended? I think that's right. Then of course we'll see remarks and permits and any denies if we have those as well. And that's the end of section 5.1, and then we'll talk about section 5.2 coming up, talking about different ways to modify the ACLs once we already have them, once they're already in place, and how to do that. I will see you then.